Khush has been the National Resource Person at SAFAR, or Social Accountability Forum for Action and Research, for the past year. Previously, he completed his bachelor's in civil engineering from LJ Institute of Technology and was a fellow with Piramal Foundation's Gandhi Fellowship and Ashoka University's Chief Minister's Good Governance Associates. He then led state operations at Indus Action for a short period of time before proceeding to pursue his MPA from Brown University. Thank you for being on this podcast, Khush, to take us through your journey of working in varied contexts and geographies of India. Really happy to have you here.
Hi, Mansa. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about the conversation.
Thank you. So why don't you begin by sharing a bit about SAFAR and what you are currently responsible for as their national resource person?
Right. So SAFAR is a collective or a resource group of 8 of us. We are all activists, researchers, development practitioners from our background, from our training. We are based out of NLS National Law School, Bangalore, and our core role as a resource group is to support citizen collectives, people's campaigns, unions, and the governments in moving forward towards strengthening transparency, accountability, participatory governance, while figuring out a way forward together through emerging challenges around these issues. SAFAR has been working for this for last 4 years, and we are still growing. We're still very, very new, still figuring out our structures, our processes, our mechanisms. But fundamentally, our work is to play that catalytic or a strategic role in between civil society organizations like campaigns, movements, unions, and the government, because we realize that there is this unexplored middle space, which has a lot of potential for both these stakeholders to come together, constantly deliberate and engage on issues of public policy, maybe planning, maybe implementation, maybe monitoring. And we believe that this idea of working between the government and the civil society organization is very critical in strengthening democratic processes and institutions that sort of hold our systems together. As you said, I joined SAFAR a year back after finishing my grad school at Brown. And as a national resource person, there are 3 fundamental things that I do as a part of a collective. One is to work with and support state resource persons of the collective. So there are 5 state resource persons who are based in Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Bihar, Meghalaya, and Karnataka. They all come from different campaigns, movements, background, while having engaged with governments at different stages of their professional careers, and some of them are very, very senior activists as well. So I largely work with them to support in their own state agendas around accountability, transparency, and participatory governance, and also try and bring synergy on the table as to like how can they work together as a community on similar issues. For example, Rajasthan and Maharashtra are doing similar things around building another construction workers board. So how can these 2 resource persons also work together and drive conversations forward? Similarly, Meghalaya has been, the resource person in Meghalaya has been working on the issues of street vendors, hawkers, and their role in urban policy, urban spaces like Shillong. And our resource person in Karnataka, Katyayani, is also working on very similar ideas, but more broadly on urban governance. So again, identifying these synergies, bringing them together to drive more sustainable and cohesive agenda forward. So that is one primary role. Second is to also design and demonstrate social accountability practices across themes and sectors. So what I mean by that is provisions of social accountability, may it be social audits, may it be grievance redress, may it be proactive information disclosure, or participatory platforms are also by design currently limited to few acts. So there are about 10 acts or policies or court judgments that have legal provisions for these practices. But uh, there are immense opportunities and varied schemes, programs where these practices can exist, even in sectors like mining and extractives or digital technology. So my role as a part of this collective is also to demonstrate how these practices can be adopted to these different sectors, and then build advocacy for a larger implementation of that in that particular sector. The third role is to also build, co-create, and strengthen platforms for people and people's organization to be a part of institutional process with the government, as I had said earlier, but, through the process of planning, implementation, and monitoring. I do all these things again with two of my colleagues who are also more floating, more national sort of resource persons. Apart from these roles, we also, as SAFAR, teach a course on accountability and governance to the Masters in Public Policy students at NLS Bangalore. So I'm also one of the course coordinators for that particular course, which students have to take. It's a compulsory credit course that students take in their first year itself. So yeah, this is what I do at SAFAR and we do at SAFAR more broadly.
That sounds like a lot of wonderful work, and I love the focus on cross-sectoral, multi-stakeholder collaborations that you all have. So thank you so much for sharing that. If I'm not mistaken, your foray into the development sector began when you were starting to be an engineer, right? It was in a very different context through the multinational student organization AIESEC. So I'd love to understand your journey right from that time. Can you speak a little about that experience and how it played a role in helping you reach where you are now?
Yeah, that's right. Honestly, it'll be a stretch to say that I was studying to be an engineer. I was just enrolled in engineering program.
And graduated
Try
from it also.
and graduated from it also. Yeah, like millions of engineers who do every year. But yeah, I mean, going into engineering, it just seemed like the best possible option because I didn't want to do medicine. And coming from a family of doctors, it was it was rather a brave decision to stand up and say that, listen, I don't want to study medicine, I would do something else. And that something else meant at that time that I would do engineering, like a bunch of my other friends who were also doing that. So it was not really an informed choice. But getting into a college, going through that first year, I think I somewhere realized that uh, while I'm okay studying engineering or okay studying the curriculum that I was, it was definitely not something that I was really passionate about, or I was interested in, or I could see a sustainable future in. So fortunately, during the same time, I came across AIESEC, as you rightly said, it's a global youth leadership organization. Uh, and I saw this one advertisement, or I would say a poster, promotion poster outside the library that said that there are internship opportunities on available for to work on social projects globally, and it just caught my attention, and I reached out to them to understand that further. And it was a good 2 to 3 months process where I had to convince my parents that, listen, something like this exists, and I really want to go for for an internship to do social work in a different country. But after fighting that battle and also going through that process with AIESEC, uh, I found a nice environment project in Russia. It was based out of a university in this city called Novosibirsk, which is in central Siberia. And that the beautiful part of that project was that it involved about 13 interns, just like me, but from 9 different countries. So it was a great experience from a perspective of diversity, from an experience of really going to a different world at the age of 19 and figuring my ways out and being that independent human being that I'm supposed to be, right? And what we are all supposed to be. I think that project, which was a 2 month, it was a 2 month experience, and that project somewhere introduced me to this to this sector, which I then used to call an impact sector. Again, it sounded cool that way. But in this project, I engage with NGOs in that city. I engage with some local groups who are working on animal rights issues. I taught in school. I engaged in activities like river cleaning over the weekends, and running those local campaigns on environmental awareness, etc. So it was somewhere in introduction. It was completely new to me. Had never thought that something I would be doing something like that, or this also is an option. But I think in those 2 months, and working around the issues that I did, I realized that this kind of work uh, was something where my skills and my passion aligned, unlike engineering. And it was something which I really loved doing for those 2 months. And uh, everything about that just felt right. The conversations, the kind of work that we did, the kind of stuff that we taught, and everything around it. So I got back from Russia, I mean, and I wanted to explore this a little further, because 2 months was a very short period for me to, make any judgment calls. And then I started working with the local chapter of this global organization in Ahmedabad. Over the 3 years that I worked in the organization, I built the local chapter in terms of designing leadership experiences for the youth in the city, working with universities in the city to, create opportunities for youth to experience similar projects and similar kind of work that I did. Worked with different countries to create projects there so that youth from Ahmedabad could participate in those opportunities. In the meanwhile, I also worked with the national team um, on similar projects where I was either coaching or mentoring emerging city chapters, or I was working on a project that involved collaboration between two countries, India and Poland, to design a very unique social project where students from Poland can participate and students from India can participate. So did a bunch of these activities for 3 years to sort of realize that there is a future. There is a future, there is some certainty in this sector, or there is something that I can learn from, and it's an area that I can contribute to. uh, things got a Things got more solidified, I believe, when I went to Indonesia. It was my last experience with AIESEC, and I was there for a month as an ambassador from India. My role fundamentally was to provide coaching and mentorship to 7 city chapters. So I was traveling in Indonesia. Uh, and in that process, it also gave me an opportunity to design or co-create social projects in Indonesia with those city chapters, considering their realities and their social issues. So that, I think, that opportunity really gave me a great opportunity and a great insight into what I'm really good at, or what I really like doing. And ever since then, I decided that, okay, engineering is something that I'll have to finish because I've started, but it's definitely not something that I would like to take up as a career. And I really needed to explore something in this development or impact sector. Uh, yeah.
It's so nice that you got to work on a wide range of interesting projects through AIESEC. I think it's like it's very lucky if as a student you are able to get that kind of exposure and that kind of clarity about the career that you want to pursue going forward. So right when you started, you worked on these wide ranges, I mean, on a wide range of causes, and eventually also across many different geographies, right? But something that I noticed is that you have consistently been working towards strengthening public systems at the grassroots. So this seems to be a constant across all the roles that you have taken up post graduation. Now, has that been a conscious choice? And like, what was the thinking behind doing those kind of projects?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, something that I've not thought about very consciously. Uh, I would say initially everything and anything that I did, nothing was by design. I mean, I was very new to this, and just like that internship in Russia, it just happened. I mean, I feel I was very fortunate and extremely privileged, honestly, to have gotten certain opportunities or certain platforms to learn and contribute the kind of things that I did. Uh, but yeah, once I think that initial phase was over and I transitioned from ISAC to a couple of other fellowship programs, and then uh, more in like adopted something in the government. Uh, I realized through these experiences and conversations that uh, democracy that we all really talk about and we've been learning since we were children. It is nothing but a relationship and transaction between people, power, and processes. And that realization, I think, uh, when it hit me and when I started seeing it uh, play out in day to day lives, I really understood that one, and I believe one of the only ways I would say is to actually work on public systems at the grassroots, empower communities, facilitate that bridge between the sarkar, I mean the malik and the sevak, as uh, people have been saying for so many years. And that clarity, I think, helped me take many decisions that I did, take up opportunities that I did, and place myself in positions where I could, talk about such relationships and such transactions. And even currently, with my role at SAFAR, we on an everyday basis, on an every conversation basis, we always try and see who are the people that we are talking about. Are we talking on behalf of someone, or are we creating a platform for those people to come in, represent themselves, their ideas, their values? What kind of power structure are we operating in, and what kind of power structure exists out there? And how are these people that we're talking about, maybe us, maybe others, how are we interacting with this power? And eventually, what are the processes that are binding people in power together, and how is that manifesting in terms of consequences, or in terms of advantages to the communities that we work with and work for to an extent. So yeah, I mean, the second half of my career, I would say a lot more of decision making was through conscious decision making or conscious choices. The first half was really random, and I feel it was largely driven through my privilege and my uh, good fortune, I would say.
When you speak about exploring and immersing yourself in the sector to gain these insights and the clarity that you have right now, and coming to these realizations, rather, I assume that the fellowships that you were a part of in the first 3 years of your career played a significant role. So, can you share a bit about your experiences at the Gandhi Fellowship and Chief Minister's Good Governance Associates?
Absolutely. I mean, they were truly transformative, I would say. I can't think of any other word but transformative, both in terms of an inner journey that I went through, in terms of my attitude, in terms of my behavior, in terms of my biases, and also a very steep outer journey in terms of my skills, in terms of my contribution, in terms of my learning. So yeah, both were truly transformative, both very different in nature, I would say. So I might take up one after another. I would start with Gandhi Fellowship, which was which I would say was very grassroots. I was living in the communities that I was working in. I was working with 5 schools. It was an interaction with micro problems and interaction with micro issues at community level on a day-to-day basis. Uh, my role, just to quickly give a background, my role in the fellowship was to work with, as I said, 5 public schools, in supporting the headmasters of those 5 schools to run these schools better, more effective, more efficient. Uh, Work on setting up processes or designing processes within the school so that interactions among the staff is healthy and is productive overall, and engaging community in the kind of work that the school was doing, may it be classroom teaching, may it be extracurriculars, whatever. So that was my role. For me, I think Gandhi Fellowship played a very, very crucial role in giving me that footing where I could start, where I could experience, where I could learn, where I could, where I could just step and I could figure out what to do, and rather hustle my way through issues that I encountered on a day-to-day basis. Uh, a lot of my work outside of school involved working with uh, women in the communities. I worked in southern Rajasthan in a district called Dungarpur, which has very heavy migrants going to Gujarat largely for work. So most of these villages and communities that I worked with had women and children as their main household population. Uh, I realized after interacting with them over a year that they were very creative. In a way, they were very entrepreneurial in their thinking, and there was something that they were constantly seeking in terms of livelihood, apart from agriculture that they were involved in. So we figured out we had a bunch of consultations to figure out what all can we do as options, and we eventually settled on making handmade soaps as a business, I would say, and set up a micro enterprise where we would make handmade soaps and sell it to the consumers in Udaipur, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Bangalore to begin with, and then see how that progresses. And it was a beautiful experience. We built something very nice over a year. There were 4 women who took ownership and responsibility of setting a micro enterprise up. Uh, we all, I think, in that process evolved as human beings. We learned a lot about our own biases, our own beliefs, and the way our communities operate, because there was a lot of resistance among the male family members who were not even in the community, and they were working somewhere in Ahmedabad. That no, who are you working with? Why are you working? Why do you have to work? So those interactions that they were avoiding, they had to face it, and it was a great experience for me sitting on the fence to see how they navigated through it, through sheer zeal and sheer passion to do something new. Similarly, we also worked with farmer communities on reducing their input costs that they were incurring in farming. We realized that input costs were 60 to 70% of their expense from the profit that they were making, and uh, they were still using those old tricks and techniques and farming technologies that they, I mean, their ancestors were using. Somewhere it needed a change, and after working with some progressive farmers in the community, they realized that there were some alternative technologies and tools that they can adopt, which would make their farming more efficient and reduce their input cost substantially. We also tried some zero budget farming techniques with them. We worked with the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, which are these centers at block levels in Rajasthan, block and district level in Rajasthan, on trainings, innovative trainings in terms of these tools and techniques. So yeah, I mean, those 2 years of my life, I believe, were a real treasure in terms of what I learned, what I contributed, uh, and formed a basis of how I see development sector, to be very honest. Um, some of the key takeaways, as you asked, were largely on the grounds of how to work with communities. And one of the things that I learned was this extremely important skill of empathetic listening. Uh, and I think I learned that through the communities that I work with, maybe women, maybe farmers, maybe schools, that how important it is to listen when we work with communities, and how crucial that is when it comes to facilitating some of the things, or some of the change mechanisms that we really want to see, and they want to see, I would say. Um, And second critical learning I also feel was, and which I feel is very less talked about in the social sector, that is social change or transformation will depend on how much ownership the community takes on that. And I will always be an outsider, and my role can never be of someone who comes with preconceived notions, biases, and parachute solutions, parachute suggestions to a community that has its own way of life, own set of belief, own sets of systems. And the moment I saw that, the moment these women took ownership of something that they wanted to do, in terms of their handmade soaps micro enterprise, they really fought it out with their community, with their own children. And I think ever since that experience, every time I've worked with any communities or I've engaged with them, I've constantly try and see what is it that they are willing to take ownership of, and start a conversation from there. uh, so yeah, I mean, Gandhi Fellowship was a truly a remarkable experience at an age of 21, 22, formative years. And uh, I believe it shaped me into a person that I am right now to quite an extent. Um, the second experience uh, that I had after the Gandhi Fellowship was of, as you said, of the Chief Minister's Good Governance Associate Program, which is hosted by Ashoka University in collaboration with the Chief Minister's Office in Haryana. It was a fundamentally different experience. While I was working with 5 communities in tribal Rajasthan, uh, in CMGGA, I was working with a district bureaucracy in one of the most industrialized town of the country, Faridabad. So very, very different. My work revolved around improving service delivery processes, setting systems for better implementation, maybe monitoring and review or feedback, identifying administrative challenges or bottlenecks, and coming up with feasible solutions that can be piloted first and be later scaled on based on how they work. And apart from my district work in CMGG, I also got an opportunity to work on some state projects, which were largely driven from the Chief Minister's office, or were a vision, in a way, a vision of the Chief Minister. So those programs also gave me a great insight in how state bureaucracy functions, what political will can achieve and not achieve. Uh, and basically this 1 year of roller coaster experience in the government as a CMGGA, I think also helped me demystify government and government systems a lot more. When I was in tribal Rajasthan and when we saw poor implementation of the policy, we would often blame the system, but we would never know what the system is, and CMGGA provided me with that clarity and that understanding that uh, system eventually is comprised of people and processes, and there is a constant interaction between them which defines how good or bad a system is. And people are at the center of it eventually. So yeah, that way CMGG was a crazy experience. I mean, there is hardly another term that I can use for it. Imagine a 24, 25-year-old person sitting in a deputy commissioner's office, working with IAS officers at state level, in an environment where the chief minister is seeking feedback from me and is also giving that feedback enough weightage to call other officers or to make decisions on real term policy. I mean, that it is a very, very powerful place to be in, I would say. And uh, I was really fortunate and privileged to have gotten that opportunity. I don't think there are many who will or who can experience such roles and such powerful experiences. But I'm deeply grateful to what it has taught me, and I'm deeply grateful to how I now put that to use, and some key takeaways for me were also on those lines, where throughout that 1 year, there was a constant trade-off between equity and efficiency that I saw systems grappling with, bureaucrats grappling with, the chief minister grappling with. Uh, an example of that would be, how do we digitize, when do we digitize, and how the digitization helps the community? Or will that digitization also create another barrier for people on ground to engage with government more effectively? A difference between a digitized end-to-end service delivery system versus an Aadhaar or versus a family ID, or a digitization of records or digitization of file movement in the government. These are all different digitization ideas, but they all have implications on equity and efficiency. So how do we choose that? Because oftentimes it did boil down to picking between the two rather than striking a balance. The second thing was also something that I put to use now in my work at SAFAR, which is utilizing best of both the worlds, from what the strength, utilizing the strength of the government, which is scale, institutionalization, machinery, reach, versus strengths of civil society organization in terms of capability to innovate, capability to pull in resources, to try certain ideas, and that capability to fail if something goes wrong. And that during my 1 year of CMGGA, there were many opportunities where I saw these worlds coming together, trying to create something beautiful or co-create something that is truly meaningful for people. But I also saw these two worlds colliding, and two worlds at times collapsing, when there were difference of opinions or when there were no common grounds which were sought. So it was a great takeaway in terms of how to utilize best of both. And the third thing, which again was, I believe, one of the great learnings of CMGJ program, was that we as representatives of the chief minister in the districts were in a way also representatives of citizens, and we were constantly bringing that citizen centric perspective, not a legal perspective, not a process perspective, not an efficiency perspective, but the citizen centric perspective in all the conversations that we had with the district bureaucracy. And that, I feel, somewhere changed the way bureaucracy looked at their own operations, looked at their own schemes, their own programs. And it really mattered how we communicated our citizen-centric view to them, uh, and how simply we communicate that, how we propose ideas or propose solutions which are feasible, and try and negotiate that space with the district bureaucracy on what should happen and what is happening. So it was a beautiful interactions more often than not, where district bureaucracy gave us a lot of space to discuss certain ideas and certain worldview. And I feel these three overall uh, were my major takeaways from a program that had that had a very high intensity, a very steep learning curve, and a very unique value proposition to a 24, 25-year-old person like me, and also to the district and the state bureaucracy. So yeah, again, both really transformative and foundational experiences of my professional career, and to an extent my personal journey as well as a person.
Wow, that was so insightful.
I'm sorry, I think it was
Wow.
just way too long.
No, no, no. It was really good listening to your experiences and the kind of takeaways that you have had from both these experiences. It was insightful for me, especially that the point that you made about equity versus efficiency, which I think is why many different players in the ecosystem, even when they are trying to do good, are often fighting for different things. And communicating differently and might not even agree with each other. I think that's where the diversity also comes into play. And it was great to hear about the transformational opportunity or the transformational experience that a fellowship offers for young professionals. So both of them on the face of it might sound similar, or all fellowships might sound similar, in that they are fellowships for young professionals, a short duration, a short stint in the development sector to work with different stakeholders, but they're so drastically unique and enriching in different ways. Like you mentioned, the Gandhi Fellowship was about working with the end stakeholders, and it gives you insights into the lives and perspectives of community members who you are working with or hoping to work for. And at the CMGGA, the focus is more on driving systemic change through the district administration. So, so yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing that. It was great to hear about your experiences, and I'm sure it will be very helpful for those who are looking to join a fellowship in the future. So since we're on this topic, I understand that each fellowship program would be different. But if you were to generalize, what were some things that you liked or disliked about an experience like this as compared to working as a part of an organization on a full-time or even a contractual basis?
Hmm. Um, I think the first thing that I can think of, to be very honest, is on a very, very personal front that I have sort of gone through, I've experienced, which is there is an immense, like both these fellowships, or rather all these different kind of fellowships, offer an immense scope of unlearning. They all challenge biases, beliefs, opinions, worldview, and a lot of that comes from the cohorts itself. I mean, my cohort at the Gandhi Fellowship was so diverse in terms of caste, class, gender, sexuality, something that I had never experienced earlier. And so it's very similar to that also followed in CMGGA in terms of the kind of skill set that they brought, the kind of professional experiences that they brought. And when a person at our age, 24, 25, or even younger in some cases, is placed in such an environment, I think it just really uh, breaks down these mental models or strong views about the world that we are raised into through books or through conversations with the family. So that I feel is one of the biggest key to the success of these fellowships as well, and something that I really loved. Second, since these are fellowships, they are in a way structured and geared in a way that young people like me or young people like us have an opportunity to make mistakes, you know, opportunity to learn from those mistakes and eventually contribute through that learning by doing, to say so. So so yeah, I mean, it is very rare that when we enter a professional field after graduating from colleges and we get a platform which in a way encourages us to make mistakes, you know, because it is designed that way and there is a support system around it, there are reflective practices around it, there is a design to those mistakes and learning from those mistakes as well. So that I would feel is a very that is something that I really loved about these different fellowship programs. uh, Third, I must say that, and this is something that I've really uh, you know have been personally benefited a lot from and I've used a lot as well, which is these fellowship programs give us a commune or a tribe, I would say, of people who have gone through experiences together. It is not just a classroom where we engage with each other for maybe 6 hours if we are really into that, and uh, engage on some external curriculum or external professor or teacher, anything like that. These are all real world experiences that we go through together. And I think that community or that tribe is very strong. I know today, anywhere I go, like I travel for my work to so many places, there will be a Gandhi fellow because the community is so big and it is not just limited to my batch. When I say I am a Gandhi fellow, I get access to all 12, 13, 14, however years there may be now, to this fellowship. And that community or that tribe that way is very strong, where I will know I'll have a place to stay, let's say in Jaipur or in Patna or in Delhi, anytime I go. At the same time, I know I can pick up my call in the midnight to cry about a very deeply personal experience that I might have felt while working or in general from life. Or at the same time, I know I would be able to pick up my call and ask for recommendations for my college applications, or pick up my call to look for a job, or to help someone who I know to find a job, So it's a very tight community that we get out of these programs, largely because we have lived experiences that have shaped us as individuals together. Uh, I also last couple of points. I feel something that I don't like, or something that I've always flagged to everyone who I've spoken to about the fellowship programs, is also that these are bubbles and these are safe, protected zones. Uh, the world may or may not be like that. So I must be cognizant of the fact that the experiences that I'm having, or the conversations that I'm having, is in a very uh, purposefully, proactively designed safe space. Uh, when I say I don't like it when uh, we as individuals are not able to get out of those bubbles and those mind spaces. I think that is where it limits us. And I also feel connected to that. There is very limited accountability of my own actions. Uh, what I mean by that is, I can go to a school, do whatever I want to do, good or bad, make mistakes. It might have some consequences, but I'm not really hold accountable towards that. Uh, of course, I have my own moral compass, and I have my own morality to guide me. But what I've seen is accountability as an idea is very loosely designed and defined in fellowships that I have been a part of largely.
Got it. Got it. And is there anything that you would recommend for someone who's struggling to decide between the different fellowships available when they are, say, trying to look at whether or not they want to enter the development sector, and the fellowship seems like a good option, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, I mean, I can say what I did. I took some time to understand differences in all these programs. I mean, there are some fellowships that are rooted in practice, and then there are some who are rooted in academia or more academic of sorts. For example, a TFI or a Gandhi Fellowship or a SBI Fellowship are all practice-based fellowship, whereas a YIF is an academic program. So it is important to understand this difference and then approach them that way, because learning out of both are going to be fundamentally different. The second is also like speak to alumni. I mean, there is no alternative to conversations, and uh, it is important to speak to different kind of alumni. Speak to someone who speaks your language. Speak to someone who comes from your geography, or region or religion. Speak to someone who comes from your college. Speak to a different gender. So I mean, try and get different perspectives about these fellowships and what they offer to make an informed choice. Uh, this is what I did. I don't know if this is a right approach or if there is an alternative approach. A little bit of it will also depend on what you really want to get out of it, or rather, a lot will depend on what you want to get out of it, and that will only like the clarity will only come if we speak to more people and try and understand these differences between fellowships.
Right. Yeah. I think that's helpful advice. The part about speaking to diverse alumni and not just a particular set of or group of people that you might have contact to. So post these fellowship experiences, you moved on to a more leadership position where you were in charge of leading Indus Action state operations in Gujarat. So what was that experience like? What did the role involve, and how did that build on what you learned as a part of these fellowships?
Indus Action was a very important experience, I believe, even though it was a very short stint, largely to unlearn a lot of bad habits, as I put it, that I picked up during CMGGA, where we had a very unique and privileged kind of access to bureaucracy at both district and state level. Uh, when I joined this action, I came back to Gujarat. I had no network. I was again a nobody to the government, and I had to wait outside a deputy director's office, even offices of other education staff at the district level. So that real experience of how government functions and how an outsider needs to engage with the government also sort of it sort of hit me on my face again. I did know it earlier when I was in the fellowship, but those bad habits during CMGGA because of the kind of privilege and access that we had sort of reinforced certain notions. My role was largely to do two things. First was to provide technical support to the education department on a policy front and on a technology front that they were developing to do these admissions under Section 12C of the RTE more efficiently and more equitably. Um, so they did have a protocol in place, a procedure in place. My role was to largely look at it, try and understand it from data from previous year's admissions, what all we can change or what all we can include in those processes and protocols to make it more inclusive in nature. And the technology that they were developing, how do we strike that balance between equity and efficiency? The other work was to the other responsibility was to work with grassroots communities and organizations in Gujarat, largely on policy outreach and participation in this admission process, so that more people from historically disadvantaged or historically underrepresented uh, groups can participate, and more individuals can get benefit, more children uh, can get benefit out of this policy. Uh, Third thing that we did was also to set up a helpline for the state of Gujarat, largely for grievance redress and application support through that 2 month admission cycle in April and May. So yeah, it was a relatively short stint, but a very, very interesting experience of working with state bureaucracy in my home state in Gujarat.
And this was a relatively short stint of 7 months because you left to pursue your master's, right? Immediately after Indus Action.
Right, and it was a coincidence actually. I was not planning to take up anything after CMGGA, but Indus Action was looking for someone for that 7-8 month period to make sure that the admission cycle that year was taken care of, and the government gets the kind of support that they required for that phase. And it just fit all right in where I was in Gujarat. I was not willing to travel outside, and they also found someone who did have experience previously of working on education and with the government. So I think I was just fortunate, like all my previous experiences.
Right. And how did you decide on the subject and geography and time to pursue your master's? So you said that you hadn't planned for Indus Action. This was something that you had thought of doing immediately after the CMGGA.
Yeah, that's right. Also, to be very honest, I took my own time. I took about a year and a half to figure out what I want to study, where I want to study, and how I want to, pursue that process. Foundational thing for me was to decide between an MBA and MPA. I think a lot of your listeners would agree to that dilemma. Eventually, for me, it all boiled down to the kind of people that I wanted to interact with, the kind of cohort that I wanted to be a part of, and the kind of conversations that I wanted to sort of be involved in. And I realized that I required skills that enable me to be more effective on public policy problems rather than more business side of problems or organization side of problems, and especially training in United States for MBA and MPP is not very different. It is just a different hat. And that is something that I realized after going through a bunch of MBA and MPP curriculums, speaking to a bunch of people across universities in both these programs. And I realized that both prepare us to solve problems. One prepare me more to work on public policy side of problems, and second, prepare me more to work on business and corporations and organization side of problems. So I chose to do the latter of working on public policy side of problems. Second, I also saw my master's as a means to an end and not an end itself. I wanted to come back to India, work on progressive politics. Wanted to work with communities here on a bunch of issues, and I was looking for a place that teaches me public policy in an interdisciplinary way and not a very economics heavy, uh, economics heavy subject. Um, I also wanted to find that middle ground between learning applicable tools to engage with global problems vis-a-vis research training. I wanted to personally be more effective at practice than research because I just think my aptitude is more like that. So, I mean, all these considerations were a reason why I took like a year and a half to scout right programs and universities that met my interests and the kind of the quality of training I would say that I was looking for. And I found that in Brown, which was a 1 year program, a very comprehensive curriculum teaching me all relevant skills and tools that I wanted to learn, gave me a great cohort of about 50-55 people. So just the right size to, interact with everyone, learn about different journeys, and not too small enough to be bored of, I would say. The program also had a component of a global experience where I had gone to Mexico for 2 weeks to study their policy problems, interact with people there, and also it had like a 3 month full-time internship option where I worked with mayor's office in Houston as a policy analyst. So overall, I think it just fit the bill perfectly in comparison to all of the programs that I'd come across. And again, I chose a 1 year program because I knew I wanted to come back to the job market as soon as I could, and that too back in India. So Brown also had a great contemporary South Asia center that focused on South Asian problems and sort of put South Asia at the forefront of emerging policy problems and emerging policy landscape in the country. So yeah, I mean, these were some of the reasons and some of my considerations of choosing my master's the way I did, and I'm very glad I went to Brown for my MPA.
So by that, I'm assuming that your takeaways from the MPA were in line with what you expected, right?
Absolutely. Like I never wanted to specialize in a theme because I do believe public policy analyst or anyone who works in the public policy field, it's more of a generic role than a very specialized role. If I wanted to specialize, I would pick that particular policy as my specialization, maybe public health or maybe education, rather than a generic public policy program. So I wanted to be that general person who can work on any public policy problem. And there were three things I would say that really uh, provided me that foundation, which I'm using currently as well. First was to define or articulate a public policy problem. I remember our director in his opening class on public policy analysis had actually posed questions around what is a public policy problem and what is not. So understanding that, I feel, is very critical for anyone who works in the public policy space. Second was a lead from that after defining or articulating a public policy problem, what are different options to choose from? What are, like, how will I evaluate those options? And how will I then choose a solution that is based on sound analysis rather than bias and personal preferences? Again, something that I had been doing earlier, right? Where I saw a problem in livelihood and then I would go with, like, one magic tool or one magic solution, and I would try and pilot it rather than going through the exercise of evaluating options on a certain tool or a certain frame and choosing the right option based on analysis. So I think that was a second very critical skill that I took back. And third, which is an equally important but often forgotten or often not deployed skill, which is communicating my problem definition, my analysis, my proposed solution in a manner that it is adopted and implemented. And we have to remember that when I communicate that, I am communicating it to a particular person, usually a person in power who is going to act on that. So being able to communicate my work more effectively and efficiently, and so that it leads to actions which are in lines of what I had thought of, is as important as identifying problem and analyzing different solutions and choosing one eventually. So yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely phenomenal experience. Also, in addition to these hard skills, my friends, or I would say my colleagues at Brown, my professors, who all were from very diverse backgrounds, interests, who also added a lot of value to my learning and widened my worldview towards public policy in general as a domain. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all these diverse experiences, Khush. It was great listening to your journey. And before I let you go, I just have two questions that I want to ask as we conclude the podcast. The first is, so from all these diverse experiences that you have had and problems that you worked on, people that you have interacted with, what have been your insights about the development sector as a whole?
Hmm. uh, so quite a few actually. I'll try and prioritize some of them. So first is a realization after working for about 7-8 years that change is a process, and it is an incredibly slow but eventually deeply rewarding process. Uh, there is no shortcut or a magic pill. We are where we are because of decades of rotten systems and centuries of neglect, I believe. And there is no alternative but to keep pushing in the right direction, no matter how visible or invisible the outputs and outcomes are. I mean, especially on issues like justice, on issues like equity, equality, the outcomes or outputs may not be very visible uh, or identifiable, but it is it is our moral duty to keep pushing and pushing all of us, like all of us in that right direction as a community or as a society. Uh, Second, I think I've also realized that these problems and challenges that we often talk about, we see, we observe, and we sort of, try and work on are constantly and very rapidly evolving because systems and environments and ideas around these problems and challenges are evolving so fast as well. It is important to embrace this constantly evolving phenomena and evolve our frameworks, mental models, systems, approach, processes based on that. It cannot be the other way around where we have a set framework or a set system or a set mental model and we try and fix a problem to that. It will not work that way. And I think that also makes change a very long, tedious, but a rewarding process, where it is not just an input, but also constant churning out of different kind of frameworks and mental models and systems, which will eventually bring all of us to a stage where where we believe collectively that change is been achieved. Third, from my experience in CMGGA, fellowship, Indus Action, now at SAFAR, even conversations at Brown, I've realized that collaboration across sectors and collective engagement of people with the government are means to an end as well as an end in itself. This is something that we often also say at SAFAR. Uh, we we do not just want to collaborate or collectively engage uh, because we have to or because it is a right way, but we also feel that platform in itself is sometimes a very important end to bring that democracy alive. Uh, and oftentimes it also is just a means to bring a larger democratic principle active, or larger activate larger institutions to work more openly and democratically. So these three, I feel, have been some insights, and I also would like to share something that I've observed very often and that I feel should be flagged while we are talking about my experiences and insights from the development sector, that I have seen that this sector is very, very, very diverse at the bottom. When we talk to field staff, when we talk to middle level managers, it is very diverse in terms of caste, class, gender, sexuality, uh, everything. But when it comes to the top, when it comes to the leadership, it is highly homogeneous. Uh, Again, on the same parameters. I also feel that this sector is deeply unorganized, and despite all of us working, all of us are working for people in the society in a way, or with people in the society in a way, we hardly work for the people who are in the sector. I have myself experienced and I've seen people going through terrible work-life balance. I have seen many organizations using passion and larger public good as an excuse for ridiculous work hours and ridiculous expectations from people who are a part of those organizations. I've seen really, really terrible pay structure, violation of basic human rights, and really high barriers like, ability to speak English or ability to make fine PPTs as those limiting factors for upward mobility. And this may be true for private sector as well to an extent, but I feel these kind of barriers and these kind of trends also make social sector in a way very exclusive for people with privilege. I mean, people who have some spare money to uh, work at a lower wage or lower uh, pay structure, I would say, or who are using social sector as a ladder to then uh, jump on to do a master's or a PhD or whatever. Uh, so to summarize that, and this is an observation, I mean, I may be completely wrong, but I feel uh, there is a role for everybody in the social sector, everybody and anybody, irrespective of skills, attitude, training, mindset. There is a role for everyone. But when it comes to climbing up the ladder, I feel it takes special privilege, and it is not just limited to uh, my skills of an effective practitioners, but a lot more, and around those dynamics that I initially sort of talked about. And that's why we see such homogeneity at the highest level.
Yeah, again, very, very, very insightful. So thank you for that. And considering all these factors, looking back, what are some things that you wish you had known when you were a student and contemplating a career in the development sector?
First of all, I think it's a sector of thousands of professionals, uh, and not just a hobby that a few have picked up. I never knew that. I mean, honestly, when I was a student and when I went for that internship, got back, started working, I always thought that, okay, sector are those few NGOs and organization activist type log who are trying to do something that they want to do, but that's it. I never saw it as a sector, you know. So that I think was the first big realization, that there are thousands of professionals at different levels trying to, hustle it out every day, try and bring change in the best capacity that they can. Second, I also feel it is crucial to explore opportunities as early as we can. Because of all those barriers that I spoke about, I feel it is difficult to transition into social sector once we cross that 2025 range. Unless then then the second phase might come when I'm 45, 50, when I've already earned enough money, and then I just want to experience social sector more to do good rather than anything else. So I think it is important to explore opportunities early so that we can start eliminating things that we don't like or we don't really like to engage in, and also pick up things that we love to do. Um, I never knew that, but I mean, things happened in a way where I could explore opportunities early to rule out some options and pick some. So that is the second thing. Third, as I had also said earlier, it is important to talk to diverse people and not just few individuals to learn about different experiences in this sector. Uh, as I said, there is a role for everybody here, and we will find every kind of person here, every kind. And it is a very very, very useful, and I would say it is inevitable to an extent that anyone who wants to enter this sector should speak to as many diverse people as possible to understand different experiences, to find that relatability somewhere, rather than just speaking to a few. And lastly, I think it's important to be humble, to let go, to learn, to contribute, and more broadly, be an ally to a larger social commune, a larger uh, movement or a campaign that all of us to an extent in social sector are attached to. May it be for rights, may it be for services, may it be for justice, but I feel we must find that allyship somewhere, to find that drive and motivation to survive in the sector. So yeah, that's it. I feel these were some of the things that I should have known when I was a student, or I feel I would want to communicate to someone who is contemplating a career in the development sector.
Thank you so much, Khush. You've highlighted some very important observations about careers in the development space and also the sector as a whole. I think this is going to be very helpful, not just for students and young professionals looking to understand different roles, or for those considering fellowships as an entry point into the space, but also for anyone who wants to learn more broadly about grassroots and public systems in India, and also reflect on their own privilege, power, and responsibilities towards change. So, thank you. I loved having you here and listening to all of your insights.
No, this was a fantastic conversation. Did not expect it to be so reflective for me as a person as well. And it was great chatting with you. I hope I made sense, and I hope this conversation helps people who are listening to the podcast and are looking to make a career in the impact space. Yeah, I mean, you all are doing a fantastic job in trying to organize and structure this sector to an extent that you can. So kudos to all your efforts, and good luck for anything and everything that you might do after.